Already? Good afternoon. Want to share an inspirational moment. You know, all of us have been taxed and challenged the last few months in a lot of different ways, including governors. And today, or this morning, had a really nice thing happen. I got to talk to 4 people, 2 of them who were graduating from Squalicum High School up north. They were under the leadership teacher, Jason Bergman at Squalicum. And I got to talk to these 4 young people, Ian McDivitt, who's in the junior, Christina Montero, who's a junior, Marilee Westman, a senior, and Thomas Roth, a senior. And it was just an inspiration to hear young people who were just really upbeat, positive, believed we could improve our system of justice and equity and the environment today. It was just a real treat. And the reason I mention this is I know we all look for things that are going to help us get through these tough times. I had some people, four high school students. I realize no matter how tough things get, we've got a brilliant generation coming up behind us. And thank goodness they are now re-energized to try to help our community improve its situation. So thanks to Squalicum High School in the storm. I'm joined by David Postman, our Chief of Staff, and Legal Counsel Catherine Leathers today to talk about and answer questions people may have about the situation in Tacoma. A few hours ago, I announced a new investigation into the death of Manuel Ellis in Tacoma. As you know, the Pierce County Sheriff's Office has been conducting an investigation of his death for some time. However, late Tuesday, the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office contacted our Attorney General Bob Ferguson's office and said that they had just been aware that a sheriff's deputy had been at the scene of the death and had some unknown degree of involvement in the incident. So it is clear to me and also to Attorney General Bob Ferguson and to the Pierce County Prosecutor that the Pierce County Sheriff should not be involved in the investigation of the death of Mr. Ellis, because we do want to have an independent review and investigation. The local prosecutor believes, and the Attorney General and I wholeheartedly agree, that that she should not play a role either, given the involvement of the sheriff's deputy who belonged to the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. The Attorney General has also raised serious concerns about the Pierce County Sheriff's Office apparent failure to comply with the requirements of Initiative 940 that mandates an independent investigation. Separately, we were informed that a state trooper had responded to a call for assistance and was at the scene briefly while Mr. Ellis was in custody and alive, and the patrol is currently seeking more information from that trooper. So we are now working to determine who will conduct the state's independent investigation and who will actually make any potential charging decisions on behalf of the state. So while we're doing that work to clarify that, I want to emphasize that both the eventual investigation and any prosecutorial decisions will be completely independent from any conflict of interest. We are committed to that, and we intend to fulfill that commitment. We know that there are other pending cases as well in the state of Washington. I think this is a situation shows why we need to adopt what I'm proposing, which is to really have an independent body in Washington state that can handle these kind of cases to give people confidence in independent decision-making in these tragedies. We're going to take your questions a bit later. With that said, I wanted to update you on some of our COVID-19 response and where we stand on our Safe Start recovery plan. I'm joined with our lead of our personal protective equipment, PPE procurement, Reed Schuler, who can also answer questions and talk about that. We know that Washingtonians need economic recovery, and to do that we have to have adequate PPE to let people return safely, in addition to the existing needs in our medical and long-term care facilities. On Monday, one of our major suppliers, BYD, received final certification of the N95 masks that we had on order. These masks have been all but impossible to obtain at a scale since this crisis began. But I'm pleased to say we now have over 5 million of these N95 respirators on hand and another 50 million confirmed on order through BYD. As our efforts to contain the virus pays dividends, we're asking that entities that are eligible to receive items for our state emergency system to submit requests for their needs to their local emergency authority. The local emergency manager will pass those requirements on to the state. So if you're an entity that needs PPE and you qualify for potential assistance in that regard, the way to go about this is make the request to the county emergency authority. They will then forward the appropriate orders, if you will, to the state stockpile. Eligible entities include homeless shelters, long-term care facilities, hospitals, first responders, child care facilities, and congregate settings with confirmed COVID patients, and there are others as well. Now, in recent weeks, for the first time, we were able to fulfill nearly all of the requests for most all of these items. Now, for our part, we are trying to build a domestic in-state supply system for these products. Last week, I held a kind of a summit meeting with 14 Washington-based manufacturers to discuss how we can do more to control our own fate here and manufacture our own products here in the state of Washington. Scores of Washington companies already are producing hand sanitizers, surgical masks, and a range of other PPE. And this morning I spoke with FDA, Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Stephen Hahn, and asked him to ensure that we have a review of masks now made in the state of Washington, in part by outdoor research. And he assured me that he would look into this as quickly as possible. We know Washington employers are and should be required to keep their workers safe. But at the same time, we have experienced profound challenges in obtaining PPE from the beginning of this crisis, unfortunately. We know, unfortunately, the Trump administration has remained unable and unwilling to take the really necessary and available steps to really develop a national domestic manufacturing base for these products. So today I've renewed our request to the administration in a letter to the Vice President to use more of the powers of the Defense Production Act to meet the scale of the need across the United States for PPE. For example, when the administration said that Washington State's nursing homes would be supplied with additional PPE, this is what arrived. Unusable medical gowns sometimes without armholes in the tens of thousands. Meanwhile, with none of the authority of the federal government has to compel commercial product, we don't have that authority as a governor, only the president has that. And as a result, the states have had to continue to compete against one another for this PPE. To give you an example how important this issue is, we've received nearly 4 million items of PPE from the federal stockpile before it was emptied. But we've already received 20 times that amount, nearly 80 million items from our own purchases through our state efforts, with another 200 million items of PPE purchased and waiting for delivery. So in my letter to the Vice President today, we're also asking the administration to do the following. We needed to develop a comprehensive assessment of protection needs by industry and work with Congress to support a resilient national stockpile to meet that industrial base, not just medical, but industrial as well. We needed to provide more detailed and protective federal guidance for workers across all categories. We needed to assist employers on safely reconfiguring their businesses to operate in the era of COVID-19. And perhaps most obviously important, we needed to replenish and expand the federal stockpile to prepare adequately for a future COVID-19 surge and other potential pandemic outbreaks. Now, these challenges we face are significant, but they're not insurmountable. Our state and this nation can rise to this moment in its obligation to protect our people. But I want to reiterate, we're proud of our state. We tend to argue it's the best state. But we need the federal government to exercise its authority, which is unique in our system of democracy, to really protect our people and our employees. So we need to build a stockpile nationally. We need to have that access to that stockpile, and we need that to be quick. I'd like to talk about an initiative we're starting that I think is really important in our ability to continue to restart our state. I'm pleased to talk about a nonprofit effort in our state that's being unveiled today. This is the Wear a Mask Washington initiative, Wear a Mask Washington initiative. You know, we know it's clear now that wearing a facial covering is one of the easiest and most effective things we can do to protect people, our loved ones, our neighbors, our coworkers, our fellow shoppers from this deadly virus. And that means the more we all wear masks in public, the more we can protect the health of our neighbors. And the faster we can open our businesses. And I think that's something sometimes it's not obvious. The more we all do individually, the faster we can open up our entire economy to get this behind us. So on our end, the state has already made emergency distributions of more than 1 million cloth facial coverings. And we have put out an order for an additional 4 million masks. So today, we are teaming up with Restart Partners to launch Wear a Mask Washington initiative. And we hope that you can help us out on this. We're asking Washingtonians to send us videos of yourselves answering this question: why do you wear a mask? And I know there's as many good reasons as there are relatives and sisters and brothers and co-employees, but we hope you'll submit your videos. And we hope that your creativity will become apparent so that we can help jumpstart this effort. You can learn more about this in checking out restart.us/wear-a-mask-wa. That's restart.us/wear-a-mask-wa. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with. I know we're the most creative state in the United States. Any state that gave us Jimi Hendrix can give us great videos in this regard. So I look forward to that. And by the way, I just want to tell you how critical this effort is and why, frankly, we need increased commitment to this idea. We have a lot of people by the millions using masks today in the state of Washington, but it is not entirely uniform. And what we have found is that some of the areas that are most endangered right now are some of the areas that have the least usage of a really important tool, which are masks. I think about Yakima County, where I raised my 3 sons, is an area that has a horrendous outbreak now with maybe 20 times the infection rate that we need so that we can restart our economy. We could really use more people there using masks and many other places across the state of Washington. This is under our control. We can control our destiny, and here's a really good way to do it. Before I stand for questions, I'd like to reiterate that my Safe Start proclamation remains in place, and we make sure everybody takes care of themselves regarding social distancing and masks. I want to mention something that I don't think should be lost amidst the challenging times we have, and that is honoring our LGBTQ Pride Month. This is something to celebrate. June is Pride Month, and we're going to honor the legacy of the 1969 Stonewall Uprising, when Manhattan's LGBT community stood up to decades of harassment, intimidation, and violence against that community after a raid at the Stonewall Inn. It's a legacy that is especially poignant now because this is a community that stood up to injustice, and we have made strides because of the courage shown over the decades by people who are willing to speak up and stand up and march for justice. This year, we especially want to honor the many Black Americans and LGBTQ people of color who have been central to this struggle. The community has accomplished much in the last 50 years in equality and fighting for justice, but we know that there's more work to be done when it comes to justice for all communities. So we'll be raising the pride flag on the Capitol flagpole Friday, and I hope people honor both the flag and the spirit of that continuing effort. It's a great part of our state. So with that, I'd happy to stand for questions, and you can ask questions of the other group that's with us too.
Back to the Ellis case, how soon is the independent investigator expected to be named? And then what is the status of the police reform advisory group you announced earlier this week? Have members been appointed to it yet, and when is their first meeting?
We have not appointed members. We are working on that as we speak, so we're going to share that with you as soon as we have those members selected. The investigation, you asked a question about the investigation, I promptly forgot it.
How soon are you expecting that the independent investigator will be named?
It could be hours or days. What our intention was yesterday is to proceed with the Washington State Patrol as the agency, as an independent agency. We want to check, though, because since yesterday morning, we found out that there was a trooper somewhere on the scene that just appeared. We don't think he had any real involvement in the incident other than just being there. But we want to confirm that because we want to assure that whatever investigatory agency we have is truly independent. So we're checking on that. If that's not an impediment, we'll move forward with the State Patrol. If it is, we'll find some other solution to this because we simply have to guarantee independence and thoroughness to have everything unturned to find out what happened in this incident. Rachel, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you.
Rachel,
Okay.
do you have a follow-up?
I think we're good.
Next question comes from Joe with the Seattle Times.
Two questions, Governor. One regarding the Ellis case. Who's going to be making charging decisions on that out of the investigation? And what's the timeline for that completion? And for protective gear, what is the response you've gotten from the federal government recently as you've been asking for more protective equipment?
Well, the response has been, in a sense, consistent throughout this challenge, which is just, frankly, a lack of commitment and enthusiasm. It started at the beginning where the president specifically denied my request to use the Defensive Production Act. His statement that he didn't want to be a sale clerk or a supply clerk. We took the position that was an exalted position to be in a position to actually give us this life-saving supplies. And ever since then, we've just been dragging them to try to be more aggressive on this. Now, they have provided us, as I've indicated, some PPE, but it is grossly inadequate to the national needs. I don't know exactly what they've done regarding this, but I know that it has not been adequate, and it has been consistent with the president's continued efforts to downplay the seriousness of this virus. And he, unfortunately, I think, believes that making good decisions about reopening our economy means you have to ignore the needs to do the hard work while we're fighting this, including to produce PPE. So we have not seen evidence in our state of his use of the Defense Production Act. As I said, I convened 14 business leaders the other day. We saw no evidence of that. We have been successful working with local manufacturers. I mentioned outdoor research for them voluntarily to get into this business. But this is something on occasion we have to have enormous mobilization of the U.S. industry, and the president simply has been unwilling to do that when it comes to PPE. Now, the problem is we have, to some degree, have a much better position in the medical and hospital and long-term care facilities right now. But we know that the demands are going to increase as we reopen the economy, as more businesses reopen, to provide real protection for all the tens of thousands and millions of Washingtonians who need some additional assistance. So I would categorize the administration even today as unwilling to show leadership on one of the most important things that in my lifetime that the United States ought to be doing. You ask about charging decisions. So the way this works is that the governor can request the Attorney General to do an independent prosecutorial decision on what to do about a particular case. So our intention was to ask the Attorney General to do that following any decision by the Pierce County prosecutor. She now has basically said she will not be making any decision in that regard because of a lack of independence given the potential participation of the sheriff's deputy. But now we need to make sure that the current plan that we have will be independent, or whether it requires the Attorney General to engage some other prosecutor acting under his aegis to make that independent decision. So we've got to get clarity of that. We hope to in the next few days. Because again, that prosecutorial decision needs to be independent as well. I'm confident we'll be able to figure out a way to do that, but we just don't have that total answer right now.
Joe, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's it.
Next question comes from Austin with Northwest News Network.
Hi, Governor. I was just interested in two things. Your response to news today that the effort to place a repeal measure on the November ballot to repeal the mandatory sex ed bill seems to have collected enough signatures, or they're saying they have, to make it on the ballot. And also, what is your latest thinking about the pay raises the state employee pay raises set to take effect in July 1? What options are you weighing or considering?
Well, I haven't given great thought to that. As you know, these are decisions that are not within the legislator's ability to influence or the governor's ability to influence, because this was a decision by the voters in an initiative. And it's very problematic because many legislators don't feel this is the right moment for a pay raise, but that's a decision this other independent group of citizens has made. So I just haven't thought about that. I'll have to give you an answer later. If there's some other avenue to deal with this, I'll get back to you on this. And I know the concerns, we're going into a severe budgetary crisis, so the concerns are increased in that regard. The sex ed, I supported the bill. I think it makes sense that we give our young people scientifically credible information rather than fear and misimpressions. That's what this bill does. It's been demonstrated to keep people healthier, to help reduce unintended pregnancies, to reduce diseases by our young people. I think those are all good things. So I'm supportive of the law, and I will be opposing the initiative.
Austin, do you have any follow-ups?
Just briefly, Governor, because I know that there's the salary commission, but there's also the contracted pay raises. And so specifically on the contracted pay raises, you could declare a significant revenue shortfall, particularly after, the revenue forecast next week. And I just am wondering if you are considering that as an option, which would then allow you to reopen those agreements.
So we're looking at all options now. Everything is on the table. I said this yesterday or the day before yesterday. Everything is on the table. Every expenditure is on the table. And we're looking at all of those things to determine what would be a wise decision. And now to do the one that you're suggesting would essentially take a renegotiation of the contract. That's something that would have to take place. It's not just with a stroke of a pen. So everything's under consideration. And until I say otherwise, everything is under consideration.
Next question comes from Laurel with the Spokesman Review.
Hi, Governor. With these shortages in PPE across the nation, what exactly does that mean for businesses in Washington who are reopening and are required to use it, wear masks? Is there any sort of guidance or plan to assist those businesses in obtaining the PPE if they're still having trouble acquiring it now or in the coming months?
Well, yes, as I indicated, they are eligible to make a request through their local emergency command that, if appropriate, can then request from the state stockpile. Those congregate settings, businesses that have had a COVID positive in their facilities. So that's one of the eligible ways to help these local businesses. But I do, cloth face coverings are widely available. Businesses can help their employees get access to those without medically certified face coverings. And we encourage those in many, many circumstances. Now, in some of the operations of businesses, it requires more than that. Those who have to be close within 6 feet, and that's unavoidable. Sometimes I believe N95 are required. Those are a little higher end level, more expensive. But we know that if an N95 is not required, if a facial covering itself is required, businesses have wide ability to obtain that because basically it means a piece of cloth, and that should be widely available.
Governor Reed would like to add as well.
Yeah, Reed.
So to just briefly add to that, Governor, and to the question, we are looking at whether there are opportunities for the state to extend the power of the state as a large-scale purchaser of some of these goods to help cover a broader umbrella of businesses, because we do know that in between the not very challenging to obtain items like cloth facial coverings and the very difficult to obtain items like N95 respirators that are being reserved for health workers, there is a gray zone of goods that can be expensive, challenging to understand the certification of, but for which some higher risk workers need to have. And so we're considering a variety of options for ways that the state might be able to, again, use that broader purchasing power without necessarily becoming financially responsible for a broader set of businesses to help expand access. So that's a conversation that is well underway, and we're continuing to engage with businesses on questions about how we can do that.
Great. Laurel, would you like to ask a follow-up?
No, okay, thank you.
Great. Next, we go to Essex with Cairo.
Yes, Governor, on the Ellis investigation, are you willing to extend this same model to other investigations that might come up? Unfortunately, there could be a person who dies at the hands of police at any time. Would you now use this same investigation model should that come up in the near future? And if not the State Patrol doing the investigation, then who?
Well, in answer, could we use this model? Certainly, where there are other circumstances. The concern in this case was that the city of Tacoma police personnel were involved, and people did not have confidence that it was truly independent to have the sheriff's department from the immediate county do the investigation. That was the concern. I think those concerns could continue in other incidences, so you'd have to find a different geographical prosecutor or investigator to do that kind of work. Now, so yes, that could be done. And again, this whole incident, I think, buttresses what I said a couple days ago, which we really need an independent, state-based investigatory system of police misconduct. Because I'm afraid that as long as we just depend on geographically close police departments, they will not have the confidence of the public as being truly independent. Now, Initiative 940 helped in this regard because it did require an independent investigation. But that independence was, in a sense, not defined, and obviously we have not been able to achieve that. And so having a state system of investigation, I believe, is necessary. And we will be working with the community, certainly the black community and other communities of color and law enforcement as well, to figure out what that state-based investigatory unit should look like. Could it be a division of the State Patrol? Should it be a standalone agency? Should it be part of the Attorney General's office? Those are questions we'll be listening to people's ideas to make sure we make the right decision. And I'm going to heartily urge the legislators that this is an investment that is well worth it to get people's confidence in this situation. Your question about, you asked who could do, did you ask about the Attorney General? I can't read my notes here, Essex. What was your other question?
I was asking, if the State Patrol can't do this investigation, then who? And would also add your thoughts now toward the Ellis family, which had called for a very independent investigation, even last week, and only now are we getting to this point.
Could I address that?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Essex, it's a couple of things. One, we're not yet sure what will happen with the State Patrol on this. It's a big organization. Maybe if there is a potential conflict, we may be able to screen for it. The important thing, both in terms of the investigative part as well as the prosecutorial review part, is to now do a very stringent conflict review to make sure there aren't any. If there are, to figure out whether they're curable by screening certain parts of an organization. If not, then we have to look for an independent way to do this. We have the potential to reach into other jurisdictions. You can hire the AG can hire a special counsel who could oversee it. So we have a lot of options. Well, not a lot of options. We have some options, but we're not giving up yet on the State Patrol. We want to figure that out. And we have been talking to the family's attorney through this since this first came to our attention late yesterday, and we had several good conversations during the day today with him about this to try to assure the family that they are getting what they wanted. You're absolutely right. They have called for this. I had a long conversation over an hour with members of the Tacoma Action Collective on the front steps of the Ledge Building the other day, and they reached Mr. Ellis's sister on the phone. We spoke a little bit, and their attorney, Mr. Bible, and we talked about a lot of this. At that time, none of us, though, knew of the sheriff's deputy's involvement, and that came out yesterday afternoon. I will say that it was the Tacoma Action Collective who mentioned to me that a State Patrol person had responded. That was the first that had ever come to me, and it turned out that it was the first many people knew about it. And so the chief of the State Patrol, John Batiste, quickly reached out to that trooper and is asking for a report. We don't believe that trooper was interviewed as part of the sheriff's investigation. So we hope the family is now getting what they've asked for. We understand that they had asked for that earlier, and not knowing what we know now about the state of the sheriff's investigation, we thought we could do this with a review, as the governor has said, which would fill in every possible gap. But now it's fatally flawed, and there's, as the prosecutor herself said, conflict of interest that can't be resolved there. And so both pieces of this are definitely going to be done outside of Pierce County. That much we know.
If I can add something to this, I'm very confident we are going to figure out a way to have a very independent, professional, thorough investigation and a very independent prosecutorial decision. And I think what David said as far as flaws, these are things that can be overcome and will be overcome, because it's absolutely vital that we do this. You can't overstate how important this is in any case, but particularly now. This family deserves independence, and the state does as well.
Essex, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Thank you. Appreciate it, Governor.
Next question comes from Jim with the News Tribune.
Governor, on the Ellis case, why did it take so long for it to be known that a sheriff's deputy was at the scene? And do you believe that the Pierce County sheriff should resign?
I don't get involved in local decisions like that. I don't know why this was not revealed. I must say it's surprising to me. I don't know what the circumstances are. It would have been helpful had that happened earlier so that we could have gotten this investigation independently going earlier. But I don't know what the circumstances were.
Governor Postman would like to answer.
Yeah, David?
I can tell you at least what we do know about it. We don't know why it wasn't known earlier. What we do know is that late yesterday, the sheriff spoke to the prosecutor. It was about 3:30 yesterday afternoon, and said that he had just learned that personnel from his department had been at the scene and may have had some level of involvement. Don't know why that was news to him. It was news to the prosecutor, even though they've been, involved. Nobody bothered to tell her that, which obviously did create this incurable conflict for them. I think the Attorney General today in his statement raised some very good questions about that, and said that it appears that the Sheriff's Department violated parts of 940 and that, as Attorney General said, they will have to answer for that failure. So we don't know the inner workings of what happened and what didn't happen and why it happened when it did. And what we're going to focus on now is making sure the independent investigation happens as quickly as possible. There is a delay here, which I think is a great burden. But we hope to be able to find out more about what happened internally as well. And to your earlier question, there are other cases. There already are other cases pending. And we are going to have to look at what mechanisms we can use.
Great. Jim, would you like to ask a follow-up?
It's just a question about the patrol. Mr. Postman, you mentioned when you found out that a trooper was present. I guess the question is, why didn't the patrol inform the governor earlier about that?
The chief didn't know either, so we don't know that. But like I said, he is following up and asking the trooper to prepare a report on the details. What I've been told about this, and I haven't spoken to the trooper directly, it was a very quick interaction. There was a radio call for any assistance nearby. 2 troopers began to respond. One of them arrived, was met by an officer on the scene who said, "We've got it under control," and he left. The other one, that radio call was canceled before he arrived. So we're really going to have the patrol leadership talk to that trooper to get all the details of that. We don't have that now.
If I could
But
add,
the chief did not know about it when I called him.
and that's not surprising because the State Patrol has not been investigating this to date. So it's not surprising that that was not known to the chief. It is a little surprising why that was not apparently reported or discovered by the sheriff's investigation. And why that is seems to be surprising. And what you're witnessing is an effort by us to make this right. And it's not acceptable to us to have an investigation that is in any way flawed. So we're going to make it right.
Next question comes from Keith with Como.
Governor, I'd like to ask you about what's going on in Seattle. There's this thing called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What's your thought on that? The fact that the protesters have taken that over and not allowing people to come and go freely? And then regarding the National Guard.
Well, that's news to me, so I'll have to reserve any comment about it. I have not heard anything about that from any credible source. Not that you're not credible. It's just like before I espouse an opinion, I should know of which I speak.
Keith, you mentioned having a follow-up.
Yeah, as far as the National Guard, how long are you going to keep them there? And if there is a takeover of a street in Seattle where they're barricading, keeping people out, the protesters are, would you want the Guard to be involved?
That's a hypothetical. Look, we've got to have safety. I'm sure that people will find a way to have public safety everywhere in the state. I'm confident of that. The National Guard is demobilizing. Over 2/3 of them were demobilized of yesterday. I don't know if they're completely demobilized at this point or not, but if not, that'll be shortly, I believe.
Governor Postman would like to add.
Go ahead, David.
Just would add that they are demobilized, but also it is not our decision whether to send people to a street or anything like that. The way this process works is a local agency has to make a request to the National Guard for that. If the National Guard feels that that's a legitimate request, it's forwarded to our office for approval. But that is a general call up for personnel to be available, and once that is made, they work under the direction of the local authority. So in your example, if a street were closed or something, it's not going to be a decision by the National Guard or this office to say go to 12th and Pine or whatever the case may be.
Great. Next question comes from Jerry with the Everett Herald.
Governor, a short time ago, the state auditor announced they had notified you and lawmakers that they're going to do 2 special examinations of what occurred in the State Employment and Security Department with the loss of public funds. Wanted to get your thoughts on that. What questions do you hope they can answer, and your thoughts on this?
Well, it sounds like a good idea to have an audit in these circumstances. I haven't looked at the official description of this, but we would welcome that to look for any issue that could help improve the situation. And that effort is very, very diligent right now. I'm pleased that I was told this morning there'll be tens of thousands of people who will have resolution of their claims by the end of this week, with more to follow. And the department is doing, and I believe Commissioner Levine will have more to say about this, a whole host of issues to try to simultaneously root out the crime that's happening nationally. As we know, we're not the only state. There's other states that have been attacked with millions of dollars of losses, while also try to accelerate resolution of these claims. And I know it's been a very robust and multifaceted effort involving both new technology and additional personnel. We talked today about hiring additional personnel to again try to accelerate payment. It is so terribly frustrating for people right now who have not received a resolution of their claims while they're out of work. And it's just maddening to them. And I really understand that. And it's maddening, I think it should be to all of us, that's been caused not only by the fact that the claims went up by a factor of 10 times. This has never happened in our state's history. The claims came in 10 times higher than this system was designed to accommodate. And at the same time, have this criminal conspiracy try to steal this money. And so now for the department to try to ferret out legitimate claims from illegitimate claims by the tens of thousands is absolutely infuriating. So if the audit can help us identify any additional work to be done, we'll look forward to that.
Jerry, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Sure. It looked like yesterday, I believe, you had a phone call with the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate. I wondered when the last time you had a substantive conversation with the Republican leaders of the House and Senate, and when did that occur? What did you guys talk about?
Well, it's been weeks. I haven't had any recent discussions with them. I can't tell you the date. Somebody will try to get you the date. I'll try to get that to you.
Next question comes from Hannah with Cairo Radio.
Hi, Governor. A question about moving forward on this task force for police accountability. It took at least a couple of years to get I-940 passed, and even then it had to go to a public vote, wasn't immediately approved by the legislature. How can you create this task force when you do choose the members to ensure that you will get something out of it that can be tangible and get through the legislature and past the police unions?
Well, we're gonna bring people to the table who want to help improve this situation, and hopefully they're going to come up with realistic decisions. And if you listen to people and ask about their legitimate concerns and ask people to act in good faith, good things can happen. We don't want to take so long as 940 took. And I have some confidence that this will happen much more quickly, because frankly, we've had a consciousness raising in our state, in our nation, like nothing I've ever seen before. To have the broad scale recognition that has increased so dramatically in the last several weeks about the multiple injustices that we have is unprecedented. And it is my hope that that new consciousness can incentivize legislators to take meaningful action. Now, when we do that, we've got to make sure we talk to everybody who has a voice in that. That includes law enforcement. You know, they want to have things that actually work to be able to arrest crime, and they ought to be involved in that discussion. So I guess what I'm saying is, looking at the demand and the thirst for justice and the outrage at what has happened, I believe there can be a center of gravity that can do some good things. I've announced several of them that I know we need to move forward with, and I know others will have ideas as well.
Last question. Hannah, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Just specifically as it regards to police unions, the independent investigations that you're describing that you'd like to see, that has been a particular stumbling block for them. Do you have any ideas of your own on how to get that past the police unions?
Yes, we get the votes in the House and the Senate, and we listen to everybody and then pass a meaningful way of developing an independent system. You may have a different read on this, but I actually don't believe that's the most challenging situation here. Look, we all ought to be looking at an independent review authority that is not tainted and has credibility and trust of virtually everyone. What we have found in the Tacoma as example is that large parts of the community, and certainly the family, has concerns about having a sheriff's department be considered wholly independent from a city police department in their own county. And the lack of that credibility stems from the fact that these police agencies do work closely together when they are so closely aligned. I don't think it's unfair or too much to ask to solve that kind of problem. And that's a solvable problem. We ought to be able to have a state agency of one nature or another to be able to do this. The legislature ought to be able to fund it, given the enormous desire for justice that we've demonstrated now in Washington State. So this is a solvable problem. I don't believe that this should be a serious concern by law enforcement or otherwise. They ought to want an independent examination too. I'm actually fairly confident about being able to move this ball.
Final question comes from Bridget with the Wenatchee World.
Hi, Governor. I have two questions. Chelan and Douglas counties have applied to move to phase 1.5. Do you know the status of that application? And also, do you think that the state and agriculture companies are doing enough to protect ag workers? If not, what more should be done?
The Chelan, Douglas, those are under review. I know the health department is looking at them. I know that they're looking at, with interest at this. They would frankly like to see movement, but there are considerations that I believe they're looking at about whether we actually do have adequate protections for agricultural workers. Do we have adequate testing in those facilities where we have had outbreaks? There also needs to be confident that we have the full measures of protection we need, for instance, in using masks. Are people there using masks enough to give us confidence that if we do reopen stores, we're not going to see a large uptick in cases? So I think they're looking at those issues. I believe they'll be talking to some of the leadership in the next day or two about those issues.
Bridget, would you like to ask a follow-up?
My second question was, do you think that the state and agriculture companies are doing enough to protect ag workers?
Well, we think there's almost always more that can be done. We know that there's been concern expressed about having adequate PPE. That's why we have been so intentional trying to increase our stock and supplies. I do believe that the rules that we have propounded strike the right balance to protect workers while still allowing the industries to continue, but they need to be followed. We do believe that we need more testing on a more regular basis of people, particularly in congregate settings in the agricultural industry. I talked today to our Department of Health experts to see whether that is something that can be considered, particularly in the counties that are so snake bitten right now. You look at, I mentioned Yakima, that has maybe 20 times as many infections that we're looking to target to allow to go to the next phase. We have to figure a way to reduce the transmission rate in the ag industry and in some other industries as well in Central Washington. So that's something we'll be talking to others in the next few days. We do believe more work needs to be done.
Any final words, Governor?
No, again, thank you very much, and please wash your hands.